Sobriety isn't the goal, resurrection is. Now, before anyone misunderstands me, sobriety obviously matters. The substances have to go, the alcohol, the drugs, the gambling, the behavior, all of that, removing that absolutely matters because that is the first layer. But we here at SR don't believe that is where the journey ends. We believe that is where the deeper journey actually begins. So most people think recovery is about just removing the substance, but recovery is really about returning to yourself. And that is what resurrection is. It's not self-improvement. It's not becoming somebody else, not just fixing yourself. Now, before I actually get into this video, like a quick little welcome back to the channel. And if you are new here, my name is Gemma. And on this channel, we explore addiction, recovery, transformation, and what it truly means to create a life you don't need to escape. If you find value in today's video, make sure you hit the subscribe button, like the video, and definitely leave a comment below. And we reply to everyone. It really helps people. It really helps us reach people who are searching for a different way forward in this whole addiction and recovery space. So over the last few weeks, we've explored our framework: fragmentation, integration, and creation. Those were our previous videos. And in today's video, we're going to explore our final pillar, which is resurrection. Resurrection is the rebirth of the authentic self that was buried beneath all of the fragmentation. And when you begin to look at life through that lens, you start noticing that resurrection isn't just a recovery concept. It's actually a universal pattern, a universal law, a pattern that it exists throughout nature, throughout mythology, spirituality, psychology, and just human transformation itself. So that's what we're going to explore today. Now, part one of this video is the universal pattern of death and rebirth. Sorry, that's just my phone. Let me turn that off. When you look closely enough, the same pattern appears everywhere. So let's think about it like this. The seed must disappear before the tree emerges. The caterpillar dissolves before the butterfly is born. And we've all heard about the phoenix rising from the ashes, so it burns before it actually rises. In Christianity, there is the crucifixion before resurrection. In alchemy, there is the dissolution before. In Jungian psychology, there is the death of the ego before individuation. In ancient initiation rites, a person symbolically dies before entering a new stage of life. So you can see that this pattern repeats again and again and again. Something ends, so something dissolves. Something is really surrendered, and that way something new can emerge. Yet as human beings, we spend most of our lives resisting this process because we all say we want change. We say we want transformation. We say we want growth. But often what we really want is transformation without the surrender. Definitely growth without discomfort. Expansion without loss. We want the new life while basically remaining the same person. But you know this, right? Transformation doesn't work that way. Every meaningful evolution requires the surrender of what came before. So if we think about it, if you want a new life and not to be in addiction anymore, you got to give up the drink and the drug. That is the first layer. And also the entrepreneur understands this. The person who builds a company cannot remain the same person who started it. A parent also understands this. The identity that existed before children is basically gone forever. The leader understands this. Every new level requires the release of old ways of thinking, old behaviors, and old limitations. Life continually asks us the same question. What are you willing to let go of? What are you willing to leave behind? And nowhere is that process more visible than us in addiction recovery. So let's get into part 2. The first thing that has to go is obviously the substance, right? So for many people, resurrection begins with the substance, the alcohol, the drug, even the gambling, the behavior, whether it be sex, shopping, is the first thing that has to go. And because it's the most visible thing, people assume it's the entire problem. But from my personal experience overcoming meth, G, and alcohol addiction, and also working with all of our clients, it is just simply the first layer. It's the very first thing between you and your actual self. Because what happens when the substance actually disappears is it's actually quite fascinating. And I've done so much content on this. Everything underneath starts to become visible. So those emotions you've been avoiding, the fears you've been running from, the wounds that you've never actually processed, that loneliness, shame, unworthiness, the self-doubt. What else can we look at? The disconnection, uncertainty, patterns, all of the stories, identities, and the masks that we wear. So this all comes to surface when we let go of the drink and the drug. And that is why so many people can get sober and feel lost, because they think or they expected that sobriety alone would solve everything. But instead, sobriety exposes everything. And that is the beginning of the deeper work. And that's why I'm so into this part of the work, because it is literally my exact process, right? So once the substance is actually removed, you're given that opportunity to meet yourself, not the version that you numbed through alcohol or, you hid behind through drugs, or the version of you constantly escaping. You're literally just with yourself. And when you're just with yourself now, that is where the real work can begin. So in our previous video, probably about 3 videos back, we explored the idea of fragmentation, that addiction is not simply a chemical dependency. It is an expression of separation with yourself. So over time, we become fragmented, right? We are disconnected from the parts of ourselves that we've suppressed. So we suppress emotions, we've abandoned our needs, we create masks, we develop protective identities. We become who we think we need to be in order to survive. So maybe we become the achiever or the people pleaser, the perfectionist, a caretaker, a controller, or a performer. And eventually those adaptations become so familiar within us that we mistake them for who we are. We stop saying this is a strategy and we start saying, actually, that is me. But I want you to ask yourself a question. What if it isn't you? What if many of the things we identify with are simply just survival mechanisms helping us to navigate all of the pain? What if the mask is not the self? What if that adaptation is not the self? What if this substance is not the self? What if the fragmentation is not the self? And when we ask those questions, something different actually emerges, because now you're getting to the core, like, who are you beneath all of that? And that question literally leads us to integration, which is our second phase in our resurrection framework. So now let's dive into integration, and creation. So integration is the process of reclaiming all of those lost pieces. So those emotions that we abandoned, the truths that we avoided, the parts of ourselves we really rejected, and the experiences that we never really processed. And instead of running from them, we actually begin the process of meeting them and understanding them and integrating them. And and when we do that, we actually end up having more energy that becomes available, because fragmentation is actually incredibly exhausting, because we're constantly maintaining these masks, performing identities, constantly escaping ourselves. All of that is exhausting. It's literally split energy, right? So when that energy is no longer being spent on maintaining this split fragmentation, it actually becomes available for something else within us, and that is creation. And this is why we teach and guide creation after integration, because creation, at the end of the day, like when we talk about creation, it's not about building a business or making money or achieving goals. It's actually the natural expression of an integrated self. It's the movement from survival to expression, from reaction to response, from constantly consuming to actually creating. So in this phase, you stop asking, what do I need to consume or take to feel different? And you can begin asking, what actually needs to be expressed through me? And then that brings us to resurrection. So let's get into resurrection. And this is the part that most people really misunderstand, and especially with the resurrection name. So when people hear resurrection, they can automatically think we're talking about becoming somebody else, or maybe a religious kind of context, becoming like a better version, a stronger version, or a more successful version. But that's not what we're talking about here in the Sober Renewal kind of framework. Resurrection is not about becoming somebody else. It's about becoming fully yourself. There is this story about Michelangelo, and when asked how he created his sculptures, he said the sculpture already exists within the marble. His job was to simply remove everything it wasn't. So I think personally, I think resurrection works the exact same way, because your authentic self is already there. It doesn't need to be created. It doesn't need to be manufactured. It doesn't need to be invented. It actually needs to be uncovered, right? And this is why I also say that recovery is the recovery of self, because beneath the addiction, beneath all of the masks and the conditioning, the shame and the fear and the fragmentation, beneath all of that, your true essence, your authentic nature is still there waiting to be uncovered. That part of you always existed before the fragmentation, before the addiction. So resurrection is what happens when your authentic self starts to emerge into your life. And it's not as like an idea, it's literally as an embodied reality. So what do I mean by that? So you trust yourself, you stop abandoning yourself, you stop performing your life, you stop seeking your worth through validation or achievement or a feeling through substances or external approval. You begin living from truth rather than survival. You literally feel at home in your own skin, coherent, congruent, whole. And it's definitely not because life is perfect and your problems won't all disappear, right? It's actually because there is an alignment between who you are and how you live. So that is the rebirth, and that is resurrection. And this is why we go back to sobriety isn't the goal, resurrection is. Because at the end of the day, like I've said many times, sobriety simply removes the substance, but resurrection reveals the self. Sobriety creates that space, but resurrection is what emerges within that space if you do the work. Another way to put it is that sobriety ends the escape, but resurrection, it begins the return, right? The return to your authenticity, your wholeness, your expression, your truth, ultimately the return to yourself. And like I mentioned, life will always continue presenting new opportunities for growth. There's always going to be new layers. Like me, 7 years now into this journey, there's always new layers, there's always new lessons, new evolutions. But resurrection at the end of the day is a moment when you stop searching outside of yourself and you start living from the power you have and that you know you have within. So if there's one thing I want you to take away from this video is that recovery is never just about giving up something. It's not about giving up something. It's actually about returning to the self that existed before and beneath the fragmentation. It's about returning to your authenticity, your wholeness, returning to that wholeness in your truth, returning to the fullest expression of who you are. The substance is simply just the first thing that has to go, but it was never just the destination. Our purpose here is to really explore the depths of ourselves. The destination has always been you. If this video resonated with you, let me know in the comments what landed most for you. And if you would like support on your own journey, whether through our one-on-one or our group containers or one of our actual private in-person resurrection reset experiences, you can click the application link below. And I appreciate you being here, spending this time with me. I hope it was valuable, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video.